Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Shri Saraswatyai Namaha. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Samasta Jana Kalyani Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Satgurum Brahma Vidvaram Satgurum Brahma Vidvaram. Shri Guru Charan Saroj Raja Nijmana Mukura Sudhari Bharanau Raghuvara Vimala Jasu Jodayak Falachari Buddhihina Tanujanike Sumiro Pavan Kumar Balabuddhi Vidya Dehu Mohi Harahu Kale Savikar सियावर रामचंद्र की जय पवन सुत हनुमान की जय उमापति महादेव की जय बोलो भाई सब संतन की जय. Where there is Dasharatha, who has conquered his 10 senses, who is associated with the 3 queens, the 3 virtuous queens, the 3 virtues which we can see at the intellectual, emotional and physical level. The well-being of all, Kaushalya, an attitude of friendship towards everyone, Sumitra, and surprisingly, Kaikai means one who has got compassion. Yet, when physical identification takes place and one gets into self-pity, that compassion for others turns into self-pity, see how harmful it can become. But where these virtues are wedded to Dashrath Maharaj, there with the blessings of the Guru, as a worship yajna, and from that yajna, when Dashrath and Kaushalya, when the mind and the intellect are integrated together and single-pointedly seek that and that alone, that devotion, that knowledge, that glimpse of the truth that arises in the heart is the vision of bliss, or the experience, realization of bliss. And Ram, as we have seen, means one who delights everybody, in whom everybody finds happiness, and therefore it is the recognition of the Atma, the Self. But when this inspiration, this devotion, this knowledge, this glimpse takes place, it is accompanied by the other 3 brothers. And we can see our spiritual progress, as we summarized yesterday, that there is love for everyone which nourishes the world. There is humility, no sense of distinction, selfishness, ego, and this enemy, the enemy, Shatru. One who conquers it is Shatrughn. And that which is the basis for which the world survives, Sakala Jagat Adhar, one who is the abode of virtues, and all virtues that come in us is when the Lord is dear to us. And such a virtuous person, Yomat Bhakta Same Priyaha, one who has all those virtues, is dear to the Lord. When in such a place as Ayodhya, where there is no conflict, there is no split, there are no quarrels, there is no disintegration, there where Ramchandraji is born along with his 3 brothers, there is joy, happiness, delightful. And of course the childhood stories of these 4 brothers are so delightful. But at this moment, when the initial inspiration takes place, the initial vision takes place, that birth of happiness and birth of this knowledge takes place within us. It is very delightful. And slowly, slowly, as Bhagwan grows, in the Ramayana, there are beautiful portions that depict to us that how when we live our life in a particular manner, the next stage of growth happens. As we said, Ramayana demonstrates to us how we should live our life as Ramchandraji has demonstrated. At the same time, it also shows us that when this birth of Ram takes place in our heart, how things unfold and how we have to treasure this knowledge, treasure this devotion, treasure the vision that the Guru has given us. And that's how that growth spiritually takes, where there is final abidance in the truth. When Ramchandraji went to the Gurukula, quickly learnt the knowledge, came back, and even throughout the day giving respect to the elders, doing his duties, eating with his brothers is specifically mentioned. Eating with his brothers and waking up early in the morning and first bowing down to parents and Guru. And that way, even a person who has got such humility, who has got such values, becomes a delight for everybody. And therefore, one who delights everyone is Rama. In fact, such a devotee, such a person who has got glimpse of knowledge, his behavior in the world becomes such that delights everybody. Therefore, it is said, even in the Bhagavad Gita, that one who gets agitated by no one, and no one gets agitated of such a person. Such a person indeed is dear to the Lord. In the same way, Lord delighted everybody, Ramchandraji delighted everybody. And then comes a very interesting twist to the story of this wonderful time in the palace of Ayodhya, where now the boys have returned from their Gurukula, and Dashrath Maharaj, Kaushalya, Sumitra, Kaikai, all these mothers are delighted with the children. And this portion, Goswami Tulsidas ji says, listen with attention. And when he's drawing our attention to it, which means there is something very significant that is being pointed out. Sage Vishwamitra, who had an ashram outside Ayodhya, there with many of the rishis, used to perform yajna, and please don't understand yajna as people do just as a ritual to get something in return. Yajna means that spirit of love, dedication, sacrifice with the attitude Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. All those rishis who worshipped and did such acts of sacrifice for the well-being of everybody, Rakshasas who were deployed by Ravan were constantly not only creating obstacles in these practices, spiritual practices, but were also destroying, polluting these yajnas. Not only that, they were also hurting the rishis, torturing them, killing them, and even devouring them. Sage Vishwamitra, who himself has the power to create universes, it is said, and destroy universes, he goes, that one to whom Gayatri Mantra was revealed, by which he created a universe for Trishanku. That Vishwamitra goes to Dashrath Maharaj. Dashrath Maharaj receives him and says that such a great Muni has come, please bless my family, bless my children. Seeing Ramchandraji, he is delighted. And Dashrath Maharaj says that such a great Muni has come to me. What do I offer? Such blessings have come to my home. What do I offer? He says it. And Vishwamitra says, send Ram and Lakshman with me so that these two young princes can fight with those Rakshasas and protect the yajna. In the blind attachment of Dashrath Maharaj, who wanted to preserve Ramchandraji and his children for himself. Because when in our heart this knowledge, devotion, glimpse of the truth, the reality all rises, and along with all the virtues, we live in a comfort zone, and only in our meditation we want to just enjoy it. But this knowledge, like the great rishis of Vedic lore and our own Gurudev, that this has to be in the world. This joy, this happiness, this knowledge, the benefit of it has to be shared with the world. To protect the practices of the people who are doing it but are struggling. Internally also, if we are not alert and aware, as we rise away from our seat of meditation, as we go out into the world to interact with the world, because we will not be sitting in meditation for 24 hours, what are we going to encounter? And therefore, the strength of this inner spiritual realization should reflect in the world outside. Vishwamitra, the great guru, comes. Dasharatha Maharaj, when he hears, he said, now only I have got, at the last stage of my life, these 4 children, or finally I have got this peace within. You want me to leave my meditation and go out and serve? Of course, Dasharatha Maharaj, as the father of Ramchandraji, says, I don't think so, you have understood. You want me to go and do you want my son to do all this? I can do anything, I can give you whatever you want. Vishwamitra understands the love of Dasharatha Maharaj. Looks at sage Vashishta, the guru of Dasharatha Maharaj. And Vashishta explains to Dasharatha Maharaj that means by which you gain this blessing. To protect that only you're not ready to give your son there? How selfish we become even in our spirituality. It's only our peace, our sadhana, our meditation. Our Gurudev used to roar. Krishna has roared in the middle of the battlefield to Arjuna. Even though a realized master has got nothing to do, yet for a spiritual seeker in his beginning days of spiritual growth, must be watchful, alert, and as he goes out in the world, the work should be to protect that spiritual growth within and to protect the spiritual growth of society or facilitate and help it grow. And in the process, as we do, our own spiritual growth, our own spiritual realization unfolds itself. Great masters and Puja Gurudev has emphasized on this. Sage Vashishta tells to Vishwamitra that, to Dasharatha Maharaj, that if a sage has come to tell you, the Guru is telling you to protect that yajna by which you gain this, then he's only going to return you back your happiness enriched with steadiness of peace. Of course, the devotional story, if I go into it, it's heart-touching. But at the moment, let us go into this. Dasharatha Maharaj listens to his Guru Vashishta and hands over Ramchandraji and Lakshman and says, now follow Vishwamitra. Let him lead you. And Vishwamitra came here, who himself could do anything, who could have asked for army of Dasharatha Maharaj as well as taken Dasharatha Maharaj. But he says, it is the future leaders that have to be trained to be aware that if you remain comfortable at your home or in your spirituality, or only that me and my family, and do not see what is happening outside. Just outside Ayodhya, such atrocities are taking place. Therefore, be alert, be vigilant, because when that terrorism will enter your city, your heart, you have to be watchful. And when also this spark of knowledge has happened within your heart, what happens then? Sage Vishwamitra takes them, and on the way comes Tadaka. Vishwamitra says, this is that evil Tadaka who has devoured the rishis. Shoot Ramchandra. And Bhagwan Ram takes the arrow, and in one shot, Tadaka falls down. They return to the ashram, and on the way, Vishwamitra is so pleased that once Tadaka was killed, Vishwamitra gives such knowledge and powers to Ram and Lakhan, such powers to them. They come to the ashram. Next day, early morning, Ramchandraji says to Vishwamitra, Gurudev, please begin the yajna. Then comes Marich Subhav with an army of Rakshasas trying to destroy the yajnas and trouble the rishis. Ramchandraji and Lakshman fight with them. Ramchandraji hits a blunt arrow to Marich, and Marich falls 800 miles to the western coast of India. They say it was Bombay. And kills Subhav, and all those Rakshasas were either killed or driven away. And the yajna happened peacefully. And not only the city of Ayodhya or the kingdom of Ayodhya was free, even the environment around became free of these Rakshasas. Goswami Tulsidas ji himself has said, and these are not just symbolisms that we create. Mahamuni Adi Kavi Valmiki, Goswami Tulsidas ji, and the great masters like our Gurudev have explained this inner Ramayana. Tadka represents Durasha. So has also Goswami Tulsidas ji said that when this knowledge takes place, first thing that comes to an end is false expectations, false hopes, Durasha. It is from these false hopes, expectations, our desires, our attachments, and its consequence, false, and sorrows arise. Therefore, her children are Marich, Dosha, false, negativities, and Dukkha, sorrow, Subhav. These arise. And anytime these false expectations come to our mind, I will not go in details for it because our sessions are few and short. But what are our false expectations regarding wealth and wealth giving us security and happiness, you know, family attachments and expectations, and therefore amongst the family, how much pain, sorrow we experience, how much bitterness, etc., arises in our heart. A meditator cannot afford this. And when these things creep in, even in our noble work and service in society, you would have realized even by now that when you go and conduct these classes, etc., and then how these false expectations and how all our frustrations and all begin to arise. Be wary of them. With the name of, whenever such emotions rise in your heart, hold on to the name of the Lord that reminds you of that knowledge, reminds you of that bliss within, reminds you of your true nature, and conquer all these tendencies and all the other negativities that rise from it. But see, Ramchandra ji, see how subtly it is explained here, that what you considered now as your faults, whether it's your stubbornness, even your arrogance right now, this, when given a positive direction later on, becomes your positive virtues. Just as a stubbornness of a child, when given the right direction or goal, becomes determination. Just as a mischievousness of the child shows the over energy, over activity of the child, rather than it be stopped, curbed, we keep it at bay for some time. And then when we are able to give it a direction, it becomes, in fact, an asset for our growth. Later on, Marich becomes a means. He knows very well the power of Ramchandra ji. He advises Ravan, but he is forced to do what he has to do. But in his heart, he knew that in that only the benefit will happen. And therefore, when Marich later on becomes the deer, we'll explain that later on, that your faults can, being given a direction, become your virtues. Your doshas can become your gunas. This is how these three, when sage Vishwamitra saw that Ramchandra ji and Lakshman ji have done this, now they stayed in the ashram. And there, the knower, or even whose breath is the Veda, sat and learned from the rishis those stories of the Puranas, Itihasas, which they already knew, but they were listening to it again and again. This also shows us how Gurudev started Bal Vihar, and with what enthusiasm our children and teenagers, even if they have heard it, known it, when they listen to it again and again, how much more they can gain. This way, they stayed there for a number of days. Then one day sage Vishwamitra says to Ramchandra ji and Lakshman, of course there are many, many beautiful lessons to learn, but he says that in Mithila Nagari, in Janakpuri, the kingdom of Janak Maharaj, there is a great Dhanush Yagya, a bow worship sacrifice. Now, Yagya is dear to Bhagwan, and so is his instrument of action, his bow, ever ready to fight against all low tendencies and evil within and without, he's curious. Because tell a young person, I'm taking you there to get married. Do you think young boys and girls at that time also, no, not now, would have been the declaration? But the theme of our story is not that. He said there is a Dhanushyakhya. And as they left from there, they came to Gangaji. They heard from sage Vishwamitra the story of Gangaji, and they come to the ashram of Gautam Rishi. And a very significant story is there. And most of you know the story of the Ramayana, but it is the story of Ahilya Uddhar. And besides, we see it as socially and etc. There are many ways of looking at the story, but in the inner Ramayana, when sage Vishwamitra tells to Ramchandraji, he says, outside Janakpuri an ashram is so neglected. How is it so possible? It looks like a fortress, a dilapidated fortress. And sage Vishwamitra tells the story of how Indra, disguised as Gautam Rishi, came early in the morning and seduced Ahilya, and Ahilya, after some time, realized that her husband, knowing her husband that this is the early morning for his meditation, could not be here right now. But at that moment, in those moments of attraction, she gave in. When Gautam Rishi came and found out, of course, Indra was cursed and punished forever. But he also cursed Ahilya and told her that you have acted like a jada buddhi, as a stone intellect, as an inert intellect, because intellect has to be vibrant with knowledge. You have, and therefore, become a stone. She, of course, regretted, apologized, and then pleaded to Gautam Rishi. And he who cursed Indra Devata saw that she had faltered, but blessed her that you have fallen. Pata. Now sit here with steadiness like a stone, unmoving, unfaltering, and do tapa. Pata, fall, opposite of that, tapa. Concentrate and grow. And Gautam Rishi departed from there. That abandoned place, like a stone, not that necessarily she became a stone, but like a stone, Ahilya sat there. And while Ramchandraji was there, Gautam Rishi had blessed her that your tapas will be fulfilled when none other than Dashrath Putra Ramchandraji will come, and blessed by the dust of his feet, you will be purified and you will return to me. Now, socially, and marriage and all these things can be said about this. But for a spiritual seeker, Ahilya represents the pure, faithful intellect. Because Shraddha is in the intellect. Indra represents the Lord of the senses. Indra, the king of the senses, and therefore the mind. And even when our intellect dedicated with Shraddha to the words, or faith, to the words of the rishis, is living in bliss, this mind, even in the early hours of meditation, can trick you, bring an idea into your mind, seduce you. And your seduction doesn't mean into some, physical action. Seduce you with an idea of sensuality. And even though your intellect knows, see how it gets seduced. And therefore, when Gautam Rishi cursed her, he actually blessed her. And Ahilya herself says in her stuti, and I'll request them to chant that stuti in the end so that you can just listen to the stuti. Munishrap jodina atibalakina. She says, at that moment when the Muni cursed me, it was not a curse. It was a blessing, because a mistake that I did, at that moment maybe I thought it was not so great, not so bad, or what, it was a mistake. But what he blessed me was this tapa. And he blessed me that Ramchandraji will come to me. And therefore the intellect has to remain alert and vigilant. But do not despair. Do not be afraid. Gurudev used to tell us, if you keep your mind, intellect with devotion to the Lord, hold on to the name of the Lord, that mind, that intellect which would have seduced the intellect, and that intellect which would have faltered from its single pointedness and got distracted or seduced by the pleasure of the world, keep steady, keep chanting the name of the Lord, and Bhagwan himself will come. And when his vision takes place, all impurities will come to an end. And that love and compassion of the Lord, that even if we make a mistake, that blessing of the Guru, even if we make a mistake, but the lesson that we have to learn is, do not be seduced by the temptations brought by the mind through the senses. Keep yourself steady, keep that intellect steady. And the result of that is, Ahilya says, that which is the very purpose of life, that which even Shivji considers as the great blessing, for which even eyes have been given to us, or vision has been given to us, or the ability in the intellect to know has been given to us. That vision we must gain through steadiness of intellect, with our faith unfaltering. And wherever we do fall, then don't remain in the fallen condition. The glory of a human being is not to fall, But even if you fall, do all attempts to rise. Remaining, the Lord does everything. For He does not condemn. Even the most fallen, even the most sinful act that may have happened in the best of people, Bhagwan comes to purify. Shri Ram Jaya Ram Jaya Jaya Ram, 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 Jaya Jaya Ram, Jaya Jaya Ram. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.